He warned them all, but no one listened. Every time President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso sat down for an interview, his words carried the same thunderous message. If you negotiate with these stateless people, you are not stopping them. You are giving them a home. For months, many dismissed it as political rhetoric. Yet today, from Nigeria's parliament to its television studios, his warning is echoing back like a prophecy fulfilled. Across Africa's Sahel, villages have burned, soldiers have died, and presidents have begged for foreign aid that never truly brings peace. But Ibrahim Traoré said something different, something few dared to say aloud. This is not terrorism. This is imperialism. He called out the invisible hands that keep Africa trapped in endless wars, the same powers that refuse to sell weapons for defense, yet somehow arm the very rebels tearing nations apart. And now Nigeria, the so-called giant of Africa, is beginning to admit that everything Traoré said might have been true all along. A former member of the Boko Haram committee has confessed that villagers saw white-piloted helicopters landing at night, unloading cash and guns for the insurgents. Suddenly, what once sounded like conspiracy is starting to look like evidence. So here's the question. If the leader of one of Africa's poorest nations could see this coming, what were the rest of us too afraid to notice? How many African lives must be lost before we admit that the continent's enemies may not always come from the deserts, but from the boardrooms of global power? Stay with us until the end of this video, because what you're about to hear could change how you see every war on terror headline you've ever read. And if you believe that Africa's truth should be told by Africans, please share this story and subscribe if you believe that the truth is more powerful than the narrative. When President Ibrahim Traoré first sounded the alarm, most of Africa wasn't ready to hear it. He warned that what the continent calls terrorism is just a mask, a disguise for something older and darker, imperialism reborn through stateless violence. To him, the so-called jihadists weren't acting alone. They were pawns in a much larger chess game, one designed to keep African nations weak, dependent, and divided. They tell us to negotiate, Traoré said in a 2024 interview, but negotiation doesn't stop them. It only keeps them in your land until they finish their mission. Those words became the heart of his doctrine, a doctrine that would later define Burkina Faso's new alliance with Mali and Niger, known as the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. He believed that Africa's wars could no longer be outsourced to the very powers that built them. But what was once dismissed as anti-Western propaganda began to look hauntingly accurate when Nigerian officials themselves started speaking out. A retired officer who served on the Boko Haram committee confessed in a televised interview that villagers had been reporting the same terrifying pattern for years. In the middle of the night, he said helicopters piloted by white men landed and offloaded guns, goods, and money to the insurgents. The villagers didn't know who the pilots were. They only knew they weren't Africans. At the time, the committee believed the French were responsible. But years later, an American congressman reportedly admitted that it was the United States that had been involved in covert arms operations across northern Nigeria. That statement changed everything. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle began to align. During the Obama administration, the U.S. had refused to sell weapons to Nigeria on the grounds of human rights concerns. The same thing had happened to Burkina Faso. Traoré revealed that his soldiers were denied arms to defend themselves, while the insurgents they fought wielded weapons more advanced than theirs. He asked the question the whole continent now whispers: if Africa is not allowed to buy weapons, how do these terrorists get them? The irony was painful. The nations most in need of defense were being disarmed, while those attacking them were mysteriously well-equipped. And just as in Burkina Faso, the Nigerian army began to notice something even more disturbing: orders from above to retreat. Several officers testified that when they cornered Boko Haram fighters and requested permission to open fire, they were told to pull back. No explanation, no strategy, just silence and withdrawal. The soldiers on the ground felt betrayed. Someone somewhere wanted this war to continue. That Traoré had warned was exactly how imperial control operates through chaos management. Keep the continent unstable, then sell peacekeeping and humanitarian aid as solutions. As these confessions surfaced in Nigeria, ordinary citizens began connecting the dots. The same patterns Traoré described: foreign weapons, strategic retreats, manipulated governments were happening across the Sahel. What he had called stateless imperialism was no longer theory. It was visible reality. Even more striking was the moral confusion spreading through political circles. Some Nigerian leaders began suggesting that these armed groups should be negotiated with, that they should be treated as political actors rather than terrorists. To Traoré, this was the ultimate insult to the thousands of civilians slaughtered by those same groups. He once said, "You don't make peace with those who destroy your people. You reclaim your land or you lose your nation." That is why Burkina Faso chose a different path, cutting ties with France, turning toward Russia, and arming itself without permission from anyone. Because to Traoré, survival was not about diplomacy, it was about dignity. And as the evidence piles up, one can't help but wonder, was Ibrahim Traoré ever warning the world? Or was he warning Nigeria, specifically a mirror reflection of everything Burkina Faso once suffered? It began like a slow awakening, whispers in the corridors of power, rumors spreading through radio talk shows and Sunday sermons. But then came the shock. Nigerian politicians, military insiders, and even church leaders began confirming details that sounded eerily like Ibrahim Traoré's warnings. For the first time, the continent's largest democracy was facing the same reality Burkina Faso had already fought its way through. After Donald Trump publicly warned the Nigerian government about the rise of foreign-sponsored insurgents, conversations that had long been suppressed suddenly spilled into the open. Politicians who had once kept quiet were now speaking out, naming things they were too afraid to name before. The Nigerian people, weary, grieving, and betrayed, started asking, who exactly are we fighting? One viral interview changed everything. A member of the Boko Haram committee looked straight into the camera and said, "We thought it was the French helping them. Now we know it was the Americans." His voice shook as he described the same scenario Ibrahim Traoré had outlined months earlier: white-piloted aircraft landing under darkness, unloading crates of cash guns and satellite gear. The admission sent shockwaves through the country. On social media, Nigerians began to post side-by-side clips of Traoré's speeches and the testimonies of their own officials. The overlap was undeniable, word for word, scene for scene. "He said this already," people wrote. "He warned us this would happen." For the ordinary citizens of Nigeria, this was not politics, it was vindication mixed with fear. They were watching the prophecy unfold. And as the truth surfaced, the atmosphere across the region turned electric. In Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, people took to the streets to celebrate Traoré's courage, chanting his name beside flags of unity and independence. In contrast, in Nigeria, outrage simmered. Why had their leaders ignored such clear warnings? Why had the world refused to listen until it was too late? Then came the moral collapse of the conversation when a former Nigerian army captain went on television to suggest that the government should negotiate with the very groups slaughtering its civilians. His exact words were chilling. "They have shown willingness to negotiate. Why are we rushing to declare them bandits?" The reaction was instantaneous. Outrage poured from journalists, widows of soldiers, and young Nigerians on social media. "Negotiate with murderers," they shouted. "Would you negotiate with those who burned our villages?" The fury wasn't just about the suggestion, it was about the betrayal. It confirmed what Traoré had said all along, that some among Africa's elite had grown comfortable with chaos because chaos keeps them powerful. In Burkina Faso, the philosophy was different. Traoré's government made the choice simple: you surrender or you run. Otherwise, we bury you. Harsh words perhaps, but in the Sahel it resonated as justice. As this message echoed across Africa, something remarkable happened. From Ghana to Senegal, radio hosts began replaying Traoré's speeches, calling him the man who saw it coming. Even Pan-African scholars who once dismissed him as a populist soldier now began to acknowledge his clarity. The climax of this awakening was emotional, not military. It wasn't about the number of guns or the strength of alliances, it was about consciousness. The people of Africa were realizing that their biggest weapon was not imported from Russia or China, it was truth. And as Nigerians watched their own leaders confirm what Traoré had said, one phrase became impossible to ignore. "This is not terrorism. This is imperialism." In that moment, what had once been a political warning became a spiritual one, a call for Africa to wake up, to see the invisible chains, and to remember that the greatest enemy is not the one holding the gun, but the one selling it. The days that followed were filled with tension. In Nigeria's cities, the air was thick with disbelief. People who once trusted their leaders now questioned everything from the purpose of their army to the role of the so-called international community. Mothers who had buried sons in the fight against Boko Haram demanded to know, did our children die defending the nation or protecting someone else's interests? The revelations had opened a wound that ran deeper than politics. It wasn't just about insurgency, it was about betrayal. For years, Nigerian families had endured kidnappings, massacres, and silence. Now they were hearing that the weapons used to kill their loved ones might have been delivered by the very nations claiming to fight for peace. In the streets of Lagos and Kaduna, students began to organize quiet protests. They held up photos of fallen soldiers beside quotes from Ibrahim Traoré's speeches. A nation that cannot defend itself has already surrendered. The message struck a nerve. It wasn't anti-American nor anti-French, it was anti-hypocrisy. Nigerians were demanding the same thing Traoré demanded for Burkina Faso: transparency and sovereignty. Meanwhile, the political establishment fractured. Some lawmakers called for a full investigation into the alleged helicopter deliveries and foreign interference. Others dismissed the claims as conspiracy theories, hoping to protect diplomatic relations with Washington and Paris. But the damage had been done. The public's faith in government had evaporated. That political earthquake reached beyond Nigeria. In neighboring countries, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, citizens saw the Nigerian crisis as proof of what Traoré had long declared, that Africa's independence was still incomplete. Leaders in the alliance of Sahel states tightened their defense pacts and began accelerating plans for joint command centers and indigenous weapons programs. Traoré's firm stance: no negotiation with those who kill civilians, became a rallying cry for young Africans who felt that compromise had cost their continent too much. Across social media, the phrase "Africa will solve its own problems" began trending in French, Hausa, and English. But the civilian consequences inside Nigeria were more complex. The revelation of internal sabotage left deep scars in the military. Many junior officers felt trapped between loyalty to their superiors and the moral duty to protect civilians. The chain of command, once sacred, became suspect. Reports surfaced of desertions, unauthorized patrols, and spontaneous acts of defiance. In Parliament, a few bold voices asked whether the time had come for Nigeria to adopt what some were calling the Burkina model, a strategy of self-reliance, weapon autonomy, and regional solidarity instead of Western dependency. Predictably, the establishment pushed back, labeling it dangerous nationalism. But among ordinary Nigerians, the idea found fertile ground. And so a new political conversation was born, not between left and right, but between those who trust the system and those who no longer can. In that divide, a quiet revolution began to take shape, one driven not by guns, but by realization. Because once the people understood that terrorism might be a mask for something much larger, they also began to understand that salvation wouldn't come from outside, it had to begin within. From Washington to Paris, the revelations from Nigeria and the rise of Ibrahim Traoré's rhetoric in West Africa began to unsettle the global stage. Western governments were quick to deny involvement, but their silence spoke louder than their statements. The accusations of foreign helicopters, selective weapon bans, and secret interference struck at the heart of America's war on terror narrative, a story that for 2 decades had been used to justify military presence across the African continent. In the United States, foreign policy analysts began to debate what was happening in the Sahel. Some warned that countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger were falling under Russian influence. Others, however, quietly admitted that Washington's credibility in Africa was collapsing. How do you convince nations of your goodwill when the same nations claim your policies leave them defenseless against the very enemies you promised to help them fight? The contrast between Barack Obama's and Donald Trump's approaches became a recurring theme. Obama's administration had enforced arms restrictions on Nigeria and Burkina Faso, citing human rights concerns. Yet this moral high ground looked increasingly hollow as stories emerged of rebels wielding advanced American-made weapons. By comparison, Trump's brief but blunt warning to the Nigerian government, urging them to confront foreign-sponsored insurgents, was now being remembered as a moment of uncomfortable honesty. Donald Trump woke them up, the narrator said. It was as if his words forced Nigeria's army to open its eyes. Across Europe, the reaction was just as conflicted. France, long accused of manipulating African security through counter-terrorism partnerships, suddenly found its influence waning. When Traoré expelled French troops from Burkina Faso and closed French military bases, Paris framed it as a tragic mistake. But across Africa, it was celebrated as liberation. Meanwhile, Moscow seized the opportunity. Russian officials publicly praised Burkina Faso's right to self-defense, offering training and weapons without political conditions. China followed a quieter path, providing infrastructure and economic aid, subtly reinforcing the same idea that Africa could operate outside the Western orbit. Global media coverage reflected the divide. Western outlets described Traoré as a populist authoritarian, while African and Middle Eastern networks portrayed him as a voice of dignity. The same event, a president choosing sovereignty, was seen as defiance in one hemisphere and leadership in another. But beyond politics, the crisis forced a moral reckoning, especially among Americans watching from afar. For decades, they had been told their tax dollars were funding peacekeeping humanitarian aid and democracy promotion. Now they were learning that some of that aid might have sustained instability instead. And that raises a haunting question for the West: can you export freedom while protecting your own interests above everyone else's? To many Africans, the answer is already clear. As one analyst from Ghana put it, every time Africa stands up for itself, the world calls it rebellion. Maybe it's just growing up. Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré became the symbol of that coming of age, a nation unafraid to tell the world that Africa's future will no longer be negotiated in foreign capitals. So now the question stands before us, not just for Nigeria or Burkina Faso, but for every nation on the continent. How many times must Africa be betrayed before it learns to trust itself? President Ibrahim Traoré was never simply speaking about security. He was speaking about consciousness, about seeing the hidden hands that turn African soil into a battlefield and African leaders into spectators of their own suffering. His words, once dismissed as radical, now sound prophetic. The enemy is not the one holding the gun. It's the one who decides who gets the gun. In Nigeria, those words now echo like thunder. The people have seen the cycle peace talks that go nowhere, weapons-denied wars prolonged, and leaders who call for help from the very architects of chaos. In the silence between explosions, the realization grows this isn't about terrorism anymore. It's about control, economic, political, and psychological. And while many in the West still frame Traoré's defiance as anti-democratic, millions of Africans see it for what it is: a reclamation of dignity, a demand that no foreign power has the moral right to decide who lives, who dies, or who governs on African land. Across the Sahel, young soldiers and villagers alike whisper a new phrase: no one will save us but us. That's the real revolution Traoré has sparked, not with missiles or speeches, but with clarity. But here's the warning. If the rest of Africa doesn't wake up soon, the cycle will repeat. The same forces that armed the chaos in Burkina Faso and Nigeria will find new battlefields in Chad, in Sudan, in Ethiopia. Because empire never sleeps, it only changes its disguise. So the question is no longer, was Ibrahim Traoré right? The question is, will we listen in time? If you believe that Africa deserves to write its own story, not in whispers but in truth, then let your voice be part of it. Please share this video if you believe that President Ibrahim Traoré's courage speaks for more than one nation. And subscribe if you believe that the truth is stronger than propaganda and that Africa's liberation begins with awareness. Because one day, when history looks back on this era, it may say that a young soldier from Burkina Faso, not a general, not a diplomat, but a man of conviction, was the first to call the empire by its real name.